Shevuot Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. We're into the second parak of Shevuot. Knowledge and reality. Na'lem ממנו מקום מקדש. The sugiya is going to explore the phenomenon of people who have an enormous amount of knowledge but are oblivious of their surroundings. Have you ever come across such people? They're very wise people, but they're just not connected with what's happening around them. In doing so, we'll understand the most beautiful comment of the Ramban in order to understand the Gemara. We go back to Daf Hey, where we started learning about this idea of נעלם ממנו, the psukim in the Torah, that this korban oleh v'yored, this very unique korban, which varies according to the economic status of the person who's bringing it, is a korban brought for certain cases of Shevuot, of oaths, and it's brought for mistakenly eating something which is kodesh or walking into a space which is kodesh when we ourselves are in a state of tumah. And the wording of the Torah is unusual and says, "O nefesh asher tiga bechol davar tameh, or benivrat chaya tameh, or benivrat behema tameh, or benivrat sheretz tameh." You touch something which is tameh, v'ne'elam mimenu, and he forgets about it. And we had a whole shir on Daf Hey on the idea of ne'elam. It's there, but it's not top of mind. It's not in one's consciousness. It's hidden. And the Gemara said on Daf Hey, "Minayin she'enu chayav ela sheyesh bo yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'sof v'he'elem benatayim." This korban oila v'yored is only applied when you had knowledge or nidra. You're not completely ignorant. It's not as if you don't know what's happening. You know the halacha, but you forgot the halacha and then you discovered you'd done something wrong in ignorance. That's where it applies. And we have the case of Rabbi, who learns that from the word v'ne'elam michlal sheyada. It says, and he forgot something. That means he first knew it. So you've got to be talking about an individual who at a certain time had the knowledge and forgot it in the moment. He wasn't conscious and he wasn't aware of it. And then later somebody pointed out to him that he'd done something wrong. Amar Rabbi Kasav Rebbe Yediyat Beit Rabo Shema Yediyah. We also need to recall that on Daf Hey, Rebbe said that even if you learn something in Cheder as a child, that's called Yediyah. You once knew it. The fact that that was a long time ago and you may no longer be conscious and aware of it, that's something else. But you once knew it, that's called Yediyah. And then the Rambam explained the uniqueness of these halachot. In our Gemara, by Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yirmiyah asks a question. Ben Bavel shala le'eretz Yisrael v'ne'elam mimenu makom mikdash. He's talking from a place of personal experience, because Rabbi Yirmiyah was a Ben Bavel who came to Eretz Yisrael, the Ramban points out. He came to Eretz Yisrael, and he doesn't know where the Beis HaMikdash is. He knows that he's Tameh, but he doesn't know where the Beis HaMikdash is exactly. As we today don't know exactly where the Beis HaMikdash is. People have got different ideas and different theories, but most people don't know where the Beis HaMikdash actually is. We're asking this question according to Rebbe, who says you need knowledge initially, you need knowledge at the end, and you need to be ignorant during sometime in the middle. And Rebbe, who holds that knowing it what you knew as a cheder child is also called yediyah, it's called knowing. What is the question? This individual, like most of us, knows that there's such a thing as a Beis HaMikdash. We've learned some Gemara, we've learned a bit of Kodshim, we've learned a bit of Tyrus. We know that there's such a thing as a Beis HaMikdash and that you're not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash if you're Tameh. So that's Yediyah. That's called knowledge. Or Dilma Kivan Dim Komolo Yadale Ha'alamahi. Or perhaps because you don't know where the Beis HaMikdash is. That's called Ha'alama. That's called not knowing. Tekun, the Gemara leaves it as a question. And Rashi explains. You never knew where the Beis HaMikdash was, and therefore the problem was you never knew, you never had the knowledge. Yes, you'd learned Kodshim, you knew about the Beis HaMikdash, but you didn't practically know where the Beis HaMikdash is. And Rashi takes us back to Daf Hey and says this is not like Daf Hey, where the person knew about Tumah and knew that a sheretz, that a dead, creepy, crawly thing could cause tumah. And Rashi strangely there says, and he knows he touched the sheretz. So I knew the halachot, and I know that I touched the sheretz. If you remember correctly, when we learned Daf Hey, we said, but I didn't make the connection. While I was touching this sheretz, I didn't connect that which I learned as a cheder child was talking about exactly this situation, and I've now become tameh. That wasn't conscious. I wasn't conscious. In that situation where he knew about the halachot and he knew that he touched the sheretz, that's not called forgetting. But this person never knew where the Beis HaMikdash was. This is not Yediyat Beit Rabo. So when I'm learning this morning, it's clear to me that Rashi is going out of his way to say something. He's explaining something. He's using a lot of words, which is not his usual style. And I'm struggling to understand what exactly is Rashi telling us that we wouldn't otherwise have known. So the Rosh calls out to me from my bookshelf and he says, I'll help you. You don't have to struggle so much. I'll help you. So I take the Rosh off the shelf, Tosfos HaRosh, and the Tosfos HaRosh learns through the Rashi with me. And we have a wonderful morning understanding the Rashi. And the Tosfos HaRosh explains that what Rashi is teaching, because the Rosh is worried. He's worried on Daf Hey, as all the Rishonim on. He's worried back here again. Why does Rashi need to say that he's aware of having touched the sheretz? The other Rishonim do not learn it that way. They learn that that's what he wasn't aware of. He knows the halachot, but he wasn't aware that he was touching a sheretz. Rashi says, no, he has to have been aware that he was touching a sheretz. Why is that so? So the Tosfos HaRosh says, Rashi learns from the posuk, and more importantly, from the wording of the Gemara back on Shavuos Daf Hey, v'ne'elam michlal sheyada, explains Rebbe, from the word ne'elam, you understand that it's the ne'elam, the forgetting of what he learned that caused him to do the action. The whole tumor, according to the Rebbe, according to the way Rashi understands it, is caused by lack of awareness. You once knew, you had the knowledge, and you even know that you're touching the sheretz, but you're not conscious, you're not making the connection, it's not top of mind. That's tumah. That's keri, that's being random, that's being casual, that's not being conscious. That's what tumah is. That's the essence of tumah. And therefore Rashi says, yes, he knows he's touching the sheretz, but he doesn't understand the implications. He doesn't understand the first order or second order consequences of what he's doing. His mind isn't there. That's called v'ne'elam. And explains the Tosfos HaRosh that has to be that what causes the tumor is the he'elem. What causes the tumor is the lack of awareness. Meaning, if I were aware, I wouldn't have had the tumor. Because that's what the cause is. You've got to look at the root cause is my mind was off it. That's what caused the tumor. So explains the Rosh, so according to Rashi, if he wasn't aware that he touched the sheretz, but he knew what he learned as a cheder child. I know all the laws of tumah, but I wasn't aware that I touched the sheretz. Then my lack of knowledge, if I forgot what I learned as a cheder child, that isn't what caused me to become tameh. Even if I remembered everything I learned in yeshiva, I still would have become tameh because I wasn't aware that it was a sheretz. So you have to say he's aware that he touched the sheretz. That can't be the problem. The problem is his mind is not making connections. He's not seeing patterns. He's not thinking in a design system sort of a way. He's just thinking black and white. He's thinking binary, on, off. He's learning halakha like many of us learn halakha. Not connecting it all together and understanding how it fits into life. And so in the real life situation, his lived reality is not halachic, because he's not conscious of the connection between what he learnt in yeshiva and what he's doing at this very moment. That's how Rashi learns it. In that case, the Rosh explains to me this morning, you now understand Rabbi Yirmiyah's problem. Because what's the story here with Rabbi Yirmiyah? Here also, he knows all the laws of the Beis HaMikdash. But what he doesn't know is that he's in Yerushalayim, he's standing in a ruin in Yerushalayim. He doesn't realize this is the Beis HaMikdash. So he's unconscious of the awareness of what's happening around him. And the result of that is he's standing with Tumah. He knows he's Tameh. And he knows where he is. I'm Tameh, and I'm standing in this old ruin in the old city of Yerushalayim. But this isn't the Beis HaMikdash. In such a situation, the fact, if I would have remembered what I learned in yeshiva about the laws of Beis HaMikdash, it wouldn't have helped me. So that really is the question, and that V'hainu Dikamar or Dilma in the third line of the Tosfos Arosh on the next page of the source sheet. V'hainu Dikamar or Dilma Kivan Dimkomo Lo Yada Ha'alamai. Since I don't know the place, I know the laws, but not the place. That's called alama. That's called forgetfulness. Klomar. Afal pi shelamad shanichnas lemikdash b'tumah chayav. Even though he learned that if you go into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, one is chayav, one is committed an avera. Ein ha'alamat ota yediyah goremet ha'avera. If I forgot that knowledge, that's not the reason I'm doing the avera. Kivan deino makir makom mikdash. I don't know where the Beis Hamikdash is. That's the problem. So my problem is not I've forgotten what I once knew. It's I'm missing information in a practical sense. I just don't know the information that I have. And that's the one side of the kasha of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Perhaps that's not called ha'alama. So we're learning this together, learning with the Rosh. Isn't it amazing how we've often talked about the fact that somebody from hundreds of years ago, we're talking about 14th century, end of the period of the Baalei Tosfos, end of the 14th century, that's 700 years ago, you're sitting and have a conversation about a piece of Gemara. The Rosh learned the same piece of Gemara. The Rosh learned exactly the same Rashi. He has in front of him, he has a sefer open in front of him, which is exactly the same sefer as I've got in front of me 700 years later. And he's teaching me. Here he comes from Spain into Ra'anana and sits down and teaches a Rashi. It's just unbelievable what access we have to these centuries of understandings and of learning. I was going to say, we're having a cup of coffee. I'm having a cup of coffee. He wasn't, as I said to you once before. And he saw I was very happy. I now understood the Rashi much more clearly. He said, but I have to tell you, when I got to Spain in the 14th century, he says, I come from the Rashi and Tosfos school. I come from Europe. But I came to Spain in the 14th century after the pogroms in Germany, and I start off in Spain, and there I meet the Rashbo and other Talmudim of the Ramban. And they've been learning the Gemaras differently. They have a different approach. And you must just see how the Ramban learns this Gemara. It's completely different from the way I've just explained Rashi. The Ramban has a different take on it. You've got to see that. I said, okay, where's the Ramban? Bring the Ramban in. So the Ramban joins us. And the Ramban teaches this piece of Gemara. And the Ramban says, Rosh, you've understood this Gemara. Of course, the Ramban is 100 years before the Rosh, but that's the beauty. We can have these conversations across generations. The Ramban says, Rosh, you've understood that what Rabbi Yirmiyah is asking is this a halama? Is this a forgetfulness? The problem is this considered halama? Is this considered forgetfulness or not? That's not how I understand Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. I understand Rabbi Yirmiyah's question is this yediyah? That there was halama, that he knew something which he has subsequently forgotten, that we know. That he remembers again, somebody points out to him, you were standing in the place of the Beis Hamikdash and you told me, that we know. But is that really called yediyah? Is this considered a yediyah that he has afterwards? And the Ramban says, Aval hacha afal gav de'ika mikdash be'olam. This person knows that there is such a thing as a Beis Hamikdash in the world. So his mind is in the world. He understands the world. He understands the world of halakha. He understands what a Beis Hamikdash is. Kivan shehu be'oto habayit. Since he is standing in a building, v'savur she'ein ze Beit Hamikdash, and he thinks he's not in the Beis Hamikdash. Harei ein lo mikdash ba'olam. I've underlined and bolded these two phrases in the Ramban so that you can see the contrast. First he says, Afagav de'ika mikdash ba'olam. He has a Beis Hamikdash in the world, but ein lo mikdash ba'olam. There's no Beis Hamikdash in his world. What does it mean there's no Beis Hamikdash in his world? He's learned Kodshim. He knows all about the Beis Hamikdash. Yes, but if you can be standing in the Beis Hamikdash and you don't know it, there's no Beis Hamikdash in your world. And that's not called the Yediyah, says the Rambam. To be, you can have all the theoretical knowledge in the world, you can know all of Shas and Poskim, but if you don't know what's happening around you, Ein lo ba'olam, it's not in your olam. You can know all the laws of a Beit Knesset. A person can know, if I can sit down with somebody and say, do you know the laws of a Beit Knesset? Absolutely. What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? I know it all. So what are you sitting in the shul and scrolling your messages in the shul? I wasn't conscious that I was in the shul, actually. Ein lo beit knesset ba'olam. In his world, there is no shul. The shul is in his mind. We talked once about when halacha is in the sforim and it isn't in one's heart. Sometimes the reality is in your head. Shabbos is a concept in your mind, but you're not in Shabbos. A shul, a beis hakneses, is a concept in your mind, but when you're in a shul, you're not really in the shul. I have a person who's in Eretz Yisrael, and I say to them, do you understand Kedushas Eretz Yisrael? Absolutely. I've learned Zroim, I've learned Kodshim, I understand Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. So what's that piece of paper you just dropped on the floor? Doesn't make a connection. Just doesn't make a connection. He thinks he's in France. He thinks he's in Italy. He thinks he's in New York, where if you drop a piece of paper on the floor, somebody will pick it up. Not a big deal. It's a bizoyon for Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. How can one do that? To walk past a piece of paper on the floor and not pick it up? It's a bizoyon of Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. When Rabbi Lapin arrived in Eretz Yisrael, he was shocked at the dirt on the streets, and he went around picking up cigarette butts off the ground. Rabbi Lapin, the great Balmusa, the Godel B'Yisrael, walked around cleaning the streets because that's Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. A person speaks in Eretz Yisrael in a way that one isn't allowed to speak. One isn't allowed to speak that way anywhere in the world, but certainly not in Eretz Yisrael. A person standing in front of the Kosel and he's behaving as if he's in Trafalgar Square. What does that mean? Yesh kotel ha'ma'aravi ba'olam? Is there a kotel in the world? Yes, ika mikdash ba'olam. In that person's world there is a kosel. But harei ein lo mikdash ba'olam. The mikdash is not his. He is not in the Beis HaMikdash. And I'm sitting and just thinking, oh my goodness, look what the Ramban has just taught us. It's not sufficient to know the theory. It's not sufficient to know the concept. You've got to live in it. It's a matter of living Torah. We had in last week's parsha, lo leches bohem. It's not just enough. And Rashi says that comes to teach you that you can't say, I've learned the mishpatim, I've learned the chukim, now I can go and learn philosophy. Now I can go and study something else. That's not what learning Torah is about. Learning Torah is lo leches bohem, is to walk in Torah, to live in Torah, to be immersed in Torah in one's day-to-day life, to see the whole world through the lens of Torah, to be conscious, just to be conscious and aware of where we are and what we're doing and what our surroundings are and what our environment is, and to adjust our behavior, both our thoughts, our speech and our actions, to adjust our behavior to the environment in which we find ourselves, and to understand that if we have the enormous zchut to have Kedusha around us, to be living in Eretz Yisrael, a zchut which most Jewish people haven't had for 2,000 years. We're back in Eretz Yisrael. Doesn't mean so we've got falafel shops and we've got nice restaurants and we've got nice beaches. That's not what we were missing for 2,000 years. For 2,000 years we had restaurants. For 2,000 years we had beaches. For 2,000 years we had everything that you've got in Eretz Yisrael except Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. That's the one thing we haven't had for 2,000 years. And we've got to be sure not only that there's Ika Eretz Yisrael Ba'ilam, that we understand the principle of Eretz Yisrael, but that Yesh Lanu Eretz Yisrael Ba'ilam. In our world there needs to be an Eretz Yisrael. And we need to be living in that and living that with full awareness and consciousness of what it is to live a life of Kedusha.